Beyond Reason Radio.
So should we go over some of the tweets that are reacting to Joe Biden's pick?
Sure, that sounds like fun.
For vice president. We all know who it was, right? Breaking news as of a couple hours ago. Mm-hmm. Kamala Harris, who, she had a horrible primary. She was running for president, remember, herself. And she had a horrible primary, eventually lost, and she still might end up being president of the United States. Look at that.
Well, she started out strong, and this kind of fizzled towards the end of the primary.
Because she's not a compelling
she
candidate.
She had no substance, I guess, huh?
I guess not. Let's see here. Eric Erickson had a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. And I lost it, but it was really funny. It says, no, this is really bad. Elizabeth Warren on the sidelines asking, how? Eric Erickson also said, Warren announces she has some reservations about the pick. Oh, no. A lot of people keep making the point that Kamala Harris is a former cop. And at this time of police brutality and wanting to defund the police, the fact that Biden would still pick a former cop is, because she was attorney general, so they kind of count that as a former cop.
But she's from California.
Well, and she's black, so none of that else matters. Because again, unless you're the police chief of Seattle, then it matters. Then if you're being a cop matters.
So if you definitely pick a black woman, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Are you biased for doing that? That's what I want to know, because you eliminated every other person.
Yeah, but you see, because she's black, she's a victim of America's racist and terrible society.
Oh, you've read the 1619 Project, huh?
Yeah, well, let's see. Another tweet from David Harsani from National Review said, I look forward to every criticism being racist and sexist.
Of course.
It will at least, save time. So there's another tweet reaction. So, yeah, this is just one. It's just amazing how, horrible America is, that a daughter of two immigrants who became an attorney general in California, who is a black woman, is now able to probably become vice president if they beat Trump, and probably has a good chance of being president during that term. Wow, America's so evil that look at that. You could argue this is proof, Mike, that America's a great place of opportunity, that the fact that she was able to rise to power and become a vice presidential candidate. No, not according to the 1619 Project. America is still very evil. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on till 8 p.m. right here on News Radio WFLA Orlando, still broadcasting from the WFLA janitor closet. They just asked that we, help clean up afterward, I guess.
Well, the interesting thing is it's not an official studio, so we are allowed food and drinks in here, just not near the equipment, unlike the other studios we have.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we don't care. You can get away with it. Yeah. Of course, they have to put, our official sign that this is a control room is just a printed piece of paper that says, please be quiet. This is actually a studio. There's no on-air light or anything, so.
Yeah. This is not a practice room.
And that voice you hear as well is Mr. Tom Benson. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing fine. Nobody was more surprised than Joe Biden to find out who Joe Biden had picked.
Right?
Yeah. Wow, I did.
Whoa, look at that. He's like, man, I could have sworn it would have been Val Demings, but okay. Kamala's my pick. What's really interesting about this is President Trump has already reacted to this. He held a press conference within the last hour or so where he talked about the pick. I have the cut up there, Tom Benson.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Are you trying to tell me something?
if you want to play, this was President Trump not too long ago reacting to the fact that Biden has picked Kamala Harris as his running mate. Here it is.
So I was a little surprised that he picked her. I've been watching her for a long time, and I was a little surprised. She was extraordinarily nasty to Kavanaugh, Judge Kavanaugh then, now Justice Kavanaugh. She was nasty to a level that was just a horrible thing, the way she was, the way she treated. So she did very poorly in the primaries, and now she's chosen. So let's see how that all works out.
Oh, he's bringing out the nasty woman.
Yes, I noticed that.
Thing.
Yes.
Oh, the left is going to hate that so much.
Did he originally coin that for her, or was that somebody else?
Hillary.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
he called her called Hillary Clinton nasty. Everyone thought that was sexist.
I'd like to hear some audio of what Hillary thinks of this choice. Pick me, pick me, pick me. Oh, I can't. Too late. I'm sorry.
There was a little... I was... Last week, when I hosted the morning show and we discussed who he was going to pick, I thought it would probably be Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. And then I started to wonder, because they didn't really have the best relationship. Mm-hmm. And Susan Rice's name was out there floating around.
Who has a working relationship with
They
Biden.
worked in the Obama administration together. She was UN ambassador. And so I thought maybe he would pick Susan Rice. But, it might be a good idea to, go back into history a little bit, not even a year ago, when Kamala Harris basically accused Biden of being a racist, even though she's like, this cut's really funny because it's like, I don't believe you're a racist, but, you're a racist. That's basically what she says here. Go ahead and play. This is from a debate this was like, after this debate where she said this is where she had her 15 minutes of fame. Everyone thought she was going to win, and then it just died out, fizzled really quickly.
That's right.
And just a reminder for Biden, because he needs reminders nowadays. I had to play this several times throughout the weeks. This is what Kamala Harris said about him.
I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
So, but no matter. They're best buds now. It's all good. And I thought it would be important also to remind Kamala Harris of all the things that Biden has said in recent years about African Americans. This is a montage we were able to get from Grabian. They come up with this stuff really good, do a really good job. And, this is really a public service to you, Harris, Miss Harris, for, what Biden has said in the past. Here it is.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It's a large, very identifiable Somali community. And if you ever come to the train station with me, you'll notice that I have great relationships with them because there's an awful lot of driving cabs.
You got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy.
My state has the 8th largest black population in America.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Have you taken a cognitive test?
No, I haven't taken a test. Why the hell would I take a test? Come on, man. That's like saying before you got in this program, if you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not, what do you think, huh? Are you a junkie?
You also said that they want to put you all back in chains, speaking about Romney and Republicans.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
So, any regrets about the language you used?
Well, I would say those things again. Unlike the African-American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community. Now, when I mean full diversity, unlike the African-American community and many other communities, you're from everywhere. But even Dr. King's assassination did not have the worldwide impact that George Floyd's death did.
I guess the best way to answer the question in a short amount of time, why is it that I get overwhelming support from the African American community?
I mean, that is a great question, Mr. Joe Biden. So there you go. Just a little public service here from Beyond Reason Radio, reminding Kamala Harris what Biden has said in the recent past, and also reminding Biden what Kamala Harris said about him. So there you go. This should go really well. It is funny that Trump just goes out swinging immediately.
Well, the tweets are now going to get added interest from a lot of people,
Yeah, I know.
because he knows who to go after.
So what do you think, Tom? What do you think of the pick?
I'm on the Trump train still.
Oh, so it doesn't matter.
No.
You're just riding that train.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Do you think Trump's going to win? Do you think this actually helps Trump?
Yeah, I think now the campaign will really pick up steam and pick up interest because everybody knows all the players. And I think there's going to be a lot of mudslinging going on. And a lot of people don't like negative advertisement, but you know what? It's been proven that it works.
That's why they keep doing it.
That's right.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
There's always the candidate that comes out there and says, I'm not going to be negative. It's going to be a purely positive campaign.
Thank you, George McGovern.
Yeah. And then, they lose and you never hear of them again. So there's a reason why exactly they go after a negative campaign. So moving on past presidential politics, because as interesting as it is, that's all I care about it. I mean, that I'm done caring about it at this point. I spent the first 15 minutes of the show on it. Can I move on to much more dire, much more important topics on the show?
We can.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I want to do that because we have to talk about the fact of what's still going on in a lot of our big cities. The fact that the Democrats are still... Well, remember last week when I talked about this and I said... Right now they're trying to deny that it actually happened, the violence. It was a figment of your imagination. But I said that eventually they're going to basically justify it. It's going to turn from denying it to justification.
And they have.
It's already happening.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't take long for me to be proven right. It wasn't, the hardest prediction to make or anything. It didn't take long for me to be proven right. So we have to talk about that. The Seattle police chief is about to retire over all of this. And Bill Barr, the voice of reason of the day, Attorney General Bill Barr on this subject, had some really good comments on Fox News over the weekend. We'll get to that as well. Lots of stuff to get to. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Yes, welcome back to the show. This is Beyond Reason Radio. Not on Facebook Live tonight. I'm still working out the details on how we're going to get that to work in the new studio. But, this is mostly a radio show anyway that you want to listen to. And there are many different ways to actually do that. You can catch the podcast on the iHeartRadio app. I'll post it on my Twitter and Facebook as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. And you can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. I still post the podcast there. And, of course, we're live here on News Radio WFLA Orlando till 8 p.m., which you can get many different ways, including the iHeartRadio app as well. Later on in the show, I do have to discuss President Trump's executive orders when it comes to the coronavirus stimulus package. It is something that you have this big smile on your face, Tom Benz. I'm trying to be a serious show here.
I have a feeling you're not a fan. However, yes. I think he's playing poker here with the Democrats.
I think you're right. And I talked about this when I hosted the morning show on Monday, but I want to go into more detail. But am I that predictable, Tom Benson, already? Jeez. So we are going to get into that a little bit later on. But I do want to address this continuing issue of violence in our cities. And what's really sad is it's spreading. So you had the problems after the George Floyd incident. The George Floyd murder, basically. And you had the problems of protests, massive protests, but then they turned violent. Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland are the biggest examples, Kansas City. But now it's even going to Chicago, where there was a huge rally to support 100 who were arrested over the weekend because they were violent and they were looting. And now there's like, well, they shouldn't be arrested even though they were violent rioters and protesters. This is where we're coming. Remember what I said. Democrats originally tried to get you to believe it was a figment of your imagination. Wasn't that big of a deal. Wasn't actually happening. Well, we can't ignore it. We all see it. It's going on. So now you have, and I haven't seen too many prominent Democrats do this yet. Actually, there have been some prominent Democrats come out against this, including Howard Dean, I believe, actually said, Democrats need to start speaking out against the violence because it hurts their movement as a whole. I think he's right on that. But they're not going to be able to ignore it anymore. But some on the radical left, that's probably my computer, Tom Benson, because I'm about to play audio here. Did you have my channel up over here?
It is ready to go. Let her rip.
Yeah, see, a new studio, I have all these things. But right now, what you have is the justification of the looting, of the criminality, of the violence. An example of this, and this has gone viral today, is there's a Black Lives Matter organizer in Chicago who basically says, you know what, they have every right to loot these stores because it's like reparations to black people. This is really what we're doing now. Here's what she said.
Care if somebody decides to loot a Gucci or a Macy's or a Nike because that makes sure that that person eats. That makes sure that that person has clothes. That's reparations. That is reparations. Anything they want to take it because these businesses have insurance. They're going to get their money back. My people aren't getting anything.
First, the idea that her people are not getting anything is absurd. This kind of goes with the AOC line that the real reason they're looting is because, they're hungry. Mm-hmm. They just want bread. Mm-hmm. That's why they're stealing Gucci bags. Right. That just makes total sense. By the way, her name is Ariel Atkins. She's a Black Lives Matter organizer in Chicago. She was the one commenting on that, basically justifying it. Mm-hmm. And, she's saying, well, they have insurance. They're rich. They'll recover. It'll be fine. Yeah, but do you understand what you're doing? You're setting a precedent for criminality, for violence. And who does that hurt? It hurts your community because businesses are not going to want to come in your community if you're basically going to justify stealing from the business. But this is all a part of a bigger trend, which we're going to talk about a little bit, that this is much bigger than protesting against police brutality. Remember when I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago and somebody said, oh, it's just whataboutism. The real issue is police brutality. There might be some who, yeah, that's the real issue. But to a lot of these organizers, it's not about police brutality. It's about their hatred of the American system. It's about their hatred of capitalism. It's about spreading Marxism and the idea that capitalism has hurt minorities, so the system needs to be torn down. It's completely obvious what's going on here. They're totally playing identity politics. They're totally playing, class warfare type stuff. This isn't new, what's going on. We can read a lot of history of Marxist movements here in the U.S. and across the world where they use these same tactics. It's not new. We can see it in front of our eyes. But it is going on. And unfortunately, the Democrats, instead of fighting against it, they're sort of giving cover to it. One person who was giving cover to it was the Portland mayor, the mayor of Portland. That was one of the places where some of the worst violence was located. For
more than 70 days, 70 nights.
70 nights of violence. And the Portland mayor, he tried to go to one of the protests and talk to them, and they basically chased him out of there, and his security had to help him. Well, the feds came in and decided to protect their federal buildings. They made a deal to leave, and they thought, it would just be utopia now. The feds are leaving. That was the only reason there was violence, right? They were the abusers.
The goons from Trump. Trump's goons.
Except it's still going on.
Yes.
Even after the feds made that deal. One person who made a really good point on this was Press Secretary Kelly McEnany, talking about the fact that Portland is starting to understand that this is violence. It needs to stop, and they need to start protecting their city. And she called him out and said, thank you for joining the club here and realizing what we've been saying for over 2 months now. Here she is.
Portland, as you know, we've secured the courthouse. But what has been so interesting to see there is finally, it took 70 nights, but finally you have the liberal Portland Mayor Wheeler saying that if you lock police officers in a building, intend to trap them in there, use an accelerant to commit arson, you are committing attempted murder, not demonstrating. It is completely reckless that it took a full 70 days for the liberal mayor to finally acknowledge that that's an unacceptable status quo, and these aren't just peaceful demonstrations, as he tried to show wrongheadedly when he walked among these rioters.
So the only good news that I see out of all of this is I don't know how long the American people are going to stand up for this kind of stuff. Well, I mean, there's some justification of it now, but your average American, they're not going to want this stuff to continue.
Their voices will be heard November 3rd.
Oh, when Trump's reelected? Possibly. I mean, a lot of people are upset how Trump is campaigning on law and order, and they say it's extreme and racist and all that stuff, but it resonates. It resonates for a reason. The business owners in Portland have complained for weeks now that they can't stay in business in downtown Portland because of what's going on. That's going to go on across the country if this violence continues to spread. We're going to continue this conversation in a moment. We have to talk about the fact that the Seattle police chief, a black woman, basically chased out of her job over all of this. We'll get to that next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
It really is the ultimate irony that the goal, I thought, of the civil rights movement was to give African Americans in this country equal opportunity. Mm-hmm. And it used to be seen as, what a great example of this you have in the Seattle police chief, Cameron Best. Not only is she a woman, but she's black. And she was able to become a part of the police department and then rise all the way to being police chief in Seattle. This should be something that progressives everywhere should be praising. Here's a moment of progress. We have a black police chief. Look how far this country has come. And what's amazing, in a lot of these cities that have the protests against cops, a lot of those police forces are majority minority police forces. And yet, the ultimate irony is you have this example of what should be praised by progressives because they said that's what they wanted. And now those people who should be the example are being attacked. The latest example, like I said, Seattle Police Chief Cameron Best. She has decided to retire. That's right. This comes after her resignation, comes after the Seattle City Council voted to cut spending for the Seattle Police Department yesterday. She announced that she will be retiring next month. She's been dealing with issues regarding police brutality nationally, as well as police use of force during Seattle protest. She was one who sympathized with some of the Black Lives Matter movement. Mm-hmm. If you heard some of her comments, very reasonable person. She just, didn't want to give up a part of the city to protesters who wanted to create the Chop Chaz zone. Oh, how dare she? But now they're cutting her funding, not only for the department, but they were trying to cut her pay.
Yeah.
By a lot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And people were saying, oh, she just cares about the money and all that. It's the only reason she wants to leave. But she pointed out that, no, it's not about the money. It was about the fact that she feels that law enforcement in her city and basically her state are not getting the support they deserve. And she can't stand by as law enforcement continues not to get that support. Now, there was an interview on a local news outlet. King 5 is the local TV news outlet in Seattle. One of the reporters there was able to catch up with her after she held a press conference where she was announcing her retirement. And they did a whole interview here. We're going to play the whole thing. And she actually is very nice, very kind, talks very very hopeful about the future. I don't know why. I'm not hopeful about the future of that city.
She's taking the high road.
But she really is taking the high road. Yeah. You know, if it were President Trump in this situation, it would be there would be a lot of different comments coming out
You're
there.
Fired.
But let's listen to the interview here. This is the Seattle police chief who's basically been forced into retirement because the Seattle City Council doesn't want to support police there, and she's had enough. Here's what she said.
When did you make this decision, ultimately?
You know, I thought about it, Chris, as you know, I've been thinking about it for some time. But I knew that if we ended up having to cut the officers, especially the newest officers, and I read to you some of the emails and whatnot that I had heard, that it probably was time for me to get out of the way and move on and let fresh eyes come into the organization. And I'm very comfortable with that decision. Again, like I said, nothing to be sad about. We can celebrate. I've had a great career, love the city, love the department, but it's time to get some new eyes in, and I think Chief Diaz is a great person to do that.
Did you make the decision then yesterday, Monday, after that final vote was taken, or did you make it over the weekend?
After the vote, it was pretty clear. I talked to the mayor ahead of time and told her that, you know, it was my intention to possibly retire. I think that final vote was it for me. I want to make sure, ultimately, sometimes you just need to get out of the way. I don't want to be the issue that creates a problem for council and the department and the mayor to move forward to protect the city. You know, there's too much at risk here. So I'm very comfortable with where I am. I've had some great accomplishments. But again, it's time for someone new to come in with a fresh view, to start that dialogue with City Council, to hopefully be able to move that needle in the right way so that we can move forward with public safety.
And a lot of focus on the original amendment last week to cut your pay by 40%, a six-figure cut, that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
But it wasn't. I mean, if people think on any level that I'm here for the money, forget it. That's not the case. I can make more in other places. The fact of the matter is, I love the city, I love the police department, and I would stay if I thought it would help us. But I really don't at this point. The relationship is fractured. We need to move on. I need to get out of the way. But it's never, ever, ever, ever been about the money. It's always been about the commitment to the men and women who work here selflessly day in and day out, to the community that deserves to have adequate public safety. We didn't have enough officers, in my view. So I think it's time to get fresh eyes on it.
And there is a council member that would like to put this to a public vote with a resolution that was passed yesterday laying out a year-and-a-half process for the Seattle Police Department. Would you support a public vote about a reimagining of the police department?
I think anytime you can get community involved in the decision-making, that is the best way to move things forward. I mean, I've dedicated my whole career to talking to people. That's how you learn what people really want. And we're here to serve the community at the end of the day.
Chief Carmen Best, who has flowers. Oh.
I mean, she was so nice about it. Oh, well, I'm still hopeful for the future. This seems like the right move. It's not a sad day. With all due respect, I disagree with you, Chief Best. I think it is a sad day because this is ridiculous. You see a rise in criminal activity in a certain area. You see a need for more police because of what's going on, not only with the protests, but also because of the coronavirus. And they're doing the opposite. And this is a black woman who is saying this, who's being chased out of her job. Oh, I guess her career didn't matter. Her thoughts didn't matter, even though she was black. Another person who I believe is a voice of reason on all of this, has been for a while, is Attorney General Bill Barr. Now, he did an interview with Mark Levin on Fox News on Sunday and made some really good points. And I just want to point out, it's refreshing to actually hear a long-form interview with him, because every time I hear him on a mainstream outlet in an interview, you could just tell that they're trying to get him in gotcha questions, you know? Mm-hmm. So many of these mainstream news outlets and Sunday shows, whatever, you don't actually get to hear what their thoughts are really on certain situations because it's all gotcha attempts. And it's really annoying. And this was really refreshing because they're just like, Mark Levin asks him a question and actually lets him speak. Actually lets him talk.
And it's a low-key response. It's not a speech. It's not, pounding the desk or anything.
Yeah, he's a very reasonable response. He's not constantly interrupted. and all of that stuff. He's allowed to actually give his opinion, give his informed opinion. I wish we could see more of this out there. Yes, I understand there's a need to challenge our government leaders. I'm not saying that, but it's also nice to have just a long-form interview. So here is Bill Barr talking about what I have been saying for a while now, that we can't ignore what we're seeing with our own eyes and hearing with our own ears. It's obvious what's actually happening. Here he is.
I've been appalled at what's on this violence because it's happening right out in the streets. Anyone with eyes can see what's happening. They see the violence. They see these groups of agitators in their black outfits, and their helmets and their shields, which incidentally have the hammer and sickle on them most of the time. Rushing the police, causing violence, throwing rocks, the people showing up with the rocks and the frozen bottles. That's happening. That's happening in front of people. You don't see it on any of the national news. You don't see it on the networks. You don't see it on the other cable stations. And yet you hear about these peaceful demonstrators. So it's a lie. The American people are being told a lie by the media.
And luckily we have social media and other outlets who can actually put out the video and the pictures. So we can see it with our own eyes. They can't hide it from everyone. And like I said, they're not going to be able to hide it for too much longer. That's why they're trying to justify it. He talks more about Antifa here as well. Here's what he said.
Well, I think they would be, generally for bringing down any administration. They are a revolutionary group that is interested in some form of socialism, communism. They're essentially Bolsheviks. Their tactics are fascistic. And your description of them is consistent with what I've seen.
I mean, he's exactly right. The ultimate irony is that they're called Antifa, anti-fascist, when their tactics are fascist in nature. Now, he talks here about how exactly Antifa and other groups like them, how they work, how they use the First Amendment, how they use peaceful protest to actually promote their violent, radical agenda. Here it is.
It's a form it's a new form of urban guerrilla warfare. Mao Zedong used to speak about the guerrilla being like fish swimming in the ocean, the way the guerrilla moves through the people. The guerrilla hides out among the people as a fish in the ocean. And what they do is they are essentially shielding themselves or shrouding themselves in First Amendment activity. They go into the demonstrations, which are exercising First Amendment activity, and they insinuate themselves in there to shield themselves. That's where they swim. And what they do is they hijack these demonstrations and they provoke violence, and they have various tiers of people from the sort of top provocateurs down through people who are their minions and sort of run the violent missions.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Now, the last comment here is very interesting. It talks about Trump derangement syndrome and why it's so prevalent right now. Here it is.
With the Trump administration, a lot of it has been the demonization of the Trump administration from day one. I went back and I watched his victory speech after election night. People should go back and look at it. It was very measured. It was a very statesmanlike speech. He offered the olive branch. He praised Hillary Clinton, thanked her for all her service to the country, talked about working together to make things better for the American people. That was the day he won, and from that point forward, there's been the resistance. They were trying to impeach him from day one. They have done everything they can. They've shredded the norms of our system to do what they can to drive him from office or to debilitate his administration. And I think it's because of the desire for power, that the left wants power because that is essentially their state of grace and their secular religion. They want to run people's lives so they can design utopia for all of us, and that's what turns them on. And it's the lust for power, and they weren't expecting Trump's victory, and it outrages them.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Trump's victory caught them off guard because they thought they were on the pinnacle of being able to take power and use that power to promote what he called their secular religion, which is basically takes us on the road to socialism. They believe it's a utopia. We know here it would be the opposite of a utopia, complete disaster. We're going to talk about Trump's executive orders, shifting gears a little bit, talk about his executive orders on the coronavirus and more next on Beyond Reason Radio.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
I just love looking at the tweets reacting to the fact that Kamala Harris is the VP pick. Someone said, reacting to another tweet, said, finally someone besides me who remembered the way Kamala giggled her way through the debates. I do remember that. She had that sort of hackle like throughout all the debates.
That was probably a nervous twitch.
Maybe.
Twitch, you know?
But, I mean, you're going to be vice president now if Joe Biden wins. I mean, come on. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So, speaking of presidential politics, it seems like President Trump might have outsmarted the Democrats here, in a way. When we were talking about it on the morning show earlier this week, Melissa said maybe this is checkmate. And I said, no, I don't think it's checkmate, but it might be check. It might be getting very, very close. We're talking about his executive orders of the coronavirus stimulus package. In fact, why don't you go ahead and play that Trump cut where he basically announced that he did this over the weekend.
Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have chosen to hold this vital assistance hostage on behalf of very extreme partisan demands. Therefore, I'm taking executive action. We've had it.
So there you go. And what this does is it puts the Democrats in a tough position. Because if the Democrats fight this in court, they're going to be blamed for it. I mean, Trump knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing here. I'm sure his advisors told him, but they were basically saying, look, just do executive action and make the Democrats, force the Democrats to be against the money that you're going to send out as unemployment benefits. And the American people, they don't care. Unfortunately, there's too many people out there who don't really understand the constitutional implications of this. The media all of a sudden cared about the Constitution over the weekend.
You can't do this.
I don't know if you noticed that. All of a sudden, the media pundits on the Sunday shows were constitutional experts, where they couldn't have cared less when it was Obama doing executive orders, but that's a whole nother subject. And you can hear here the Democrats they're a little reluctant to go down that road. They would rather criticize it on not going far enough. It's not enough. It's too confusing. It's unworkable, but they're not really going to want to fight this in court. And that kind of shows that Trump is winning the political argument. Here's a montage of Schumer and Pelosi over the weekend.
I'll leave that up to the attorneys. It doesn't do the job. It's not going to go into effect in most places because for weeks or months, because it's so put together in a crazy way. If he just would have renewed the $600 as we do in the Heroes Bill through January, things would flow smoothly.
My constitutional advisors tell me they're absurdly unconstitutional. But right now, our focus, and that's a parallel thing. Right now, the focus, the priority has to be on, again, meeting the needs of the American people.
Now, see, you notice that they kind of addressed it a little bit, but they were really reluctant to go down that road because they understand that if they start fighting this in court, Trump just has a campaign on that issue, and that's a winning issue for him. Now, you believe, Tom Benson, and I think you might be right, this is a negotiation tactic. Mm-hmm. This is just to get the Democrats back to the table because Trump got the upper hand, and they don't want him to get the credit for it.
Right. Absolutely. And he instead of the $600, he did the $400 per week.
And we've talked about the $600 problem.
And then, right, exactly. $600 was just a little bit too much. $200 a little bit too little.
And I predicted they would meet in the middle.
400 is just right, as little Goldilocks would say.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. Even if that is the reason Trump's doing this, I am not a fan of this at all, constitutionally. You know, Andrew McCarthy on National Review, he made a good point here. He says, a president has the power to dictate terms and confer benefits only insofar as Congress has granted it by statute. Congress has not statutorily empowered presidents to pay unemployment compensation to people who have lost wages due to COVID-19 job losses. Consequently, President Trump's unilateral executive action, which directs the Department of Homeland Security to divert the disaster relief funding to pay for that lost wage compensation, is unlawful and unconstitutional. He admits it's just election year politics, pure and simple. But, you know, the biggest problem with this is, once again, people are not taught why our system is the way it is. People complain about the dysfunction and the gridlock of Congress. They want things to just be done quickly. So when the president does something like this just to hand out checks, they think it's great. He's a man of action. And we're not taught that the reason why we have the government the way it is because governments are always dysfunctional. And the whole purpose of the United States was to give people, the American people, the power. So we're not all just dependent on the government to take care of us. So we gave the government a lot of power to take away our freedoms because of the pandemic, and now we're dependent on the government to take care of us. And that's not how it's supposed to work in a constitutional republic. That's why the founders put it in place where the president didn't have the power to do this. It was supposed to be difficult to just hand out checks to the American people. And a lot of people are complaining about the fact that he's deferring the payroll tax cut, saying that's really the big problem. I'm more worried about the unemployment thing, because what you have right now is the president of the United States basically writing checks to the American people. And the American people know it's from Trump. I mean, you want to start a precedent where the president can basically just write checks to people in this country because, you know, he can. I mean, you want to talk about buying votes. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's pretty much what that is. Now, they're going to justify it all kinds of different ways, but in a way, it's kind of buying votes, and it's not something that should be done. And even conservatives and Republicans should be against this, because they should look at the bigger picture and say, what kind of precedent are we expanding? Someone made a good point. Obama really set this precedent, and others before him set this precedent with these executive orders, and Trump has just kind of expanded it. And I think they're exactly right on that. Mm-hmm. But the idea is you can just start writing checks to the American people over this is... I'm sorry. I am not a fan of this. No matter what the negotiation tactic is, we shouldn't be okay with the president having that much power. There's a reason why we didn't give presidents that much power, or the government that much power, so we could be, you know, a free people. Just saying. I appreciate you listening to the show. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time. If you missed any of the show, catch the podcast, as always, on the iHeartRadio app or anywhere that podcasts are available, like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. And, well, catch you guys next time.